Well, it's over. Another summer that we won't in time ever forget. Some fantastic moments. Argentina, deserved winners, congratulations. Losing another semi-final, it hurts, particularly in the way that we lost it. I'm not going to go into details about last night's loss too much. Watch my live stream on that, so click the link in the description below. But obviously I will reflect on that, but I'm also going to reflect on England's World Cup in general and overall. Have we progressed under Thomas Tuchel? We're 24 hours from last night's defeat, so I've given myself time to sort of get my head around this, to try and think rationally about how I feel about this tournament and last night. But today I want to look back at the entire tournament, sum it up and see where this England team are at. Should Thomas Tuchel stay? I think as well is going to be a big question I ask. Should England have done better? Was it there within our grasp? Were England lucky in points? Let's take a look. Let's go back through this one. But let's rewind the clock back to the start of the tournament, and I would say expectations going into this tournament for England weren't wild. You know, they weren't extremely high for this team. We all said Thomas Tuchel, these were going to be his biggest tests. He hadn't really been tested in qualification as England manager, so it just felt like a bit of an unknown. People were looking at the draw and maybe thinking quarterfinals, this may be it for this year for this England side. No England fan, or hardly any England fans I met, were expecting England to win this tournament, and that never was the expectation, even when we were in the semi-final. The squad still looked capable though. Harry Kane was leading the line, but it just shows you where this England team were at the beginning, because there were some huge worries, about the defence that didn't go away, quite frankly, for at least 2 or 3 games. And then there was the Jude Bellingham debate. There was genuinely debate amongst fans and pundits alike whether Jude Bellingham should start in this tournament. Genuinely, that was where we was at. So I think it's fair to say, and even now at the end of this tournament, we still don't really truly know what England's best full starting 11 is. And there were plenty of doubts going into this tournament. So in some ways, though, you could argue some positions have become more solidified. It's clear what our best certain 8 is, which maybe weren't there before the World Cup. We still don't know who our best wingers are. You look at Saka, Gordon, Rashford, Madueke, none of them have really staked a claim. Maybe Anthony Gordon comes out the most respected at the end of this tournament, but I don't think any of them really have put their flag on that land and said, right, this is my position now. But as the tournament went on, you know, it felt like we were going to get there. The Croatia game, the opening game against Croatia, actually exceeded expectations for most England fans. It was a great performance, really strong. That was followed, though, by a traditionally poor second game at a World Cup, and it just felt a bit, dare I say, Gareth Southgate. We were so negative. Ghana, quite frankly, we were unfortunate not to win that game, possibly. And then there was the performance against Panama, which was sort of job done. But again, it just wasn't great. It did feel a little bit like the Euros a couple of years back, where we were scraping through games. Obviously, then on to Congo taking the lead, and England scoring a couple of late goals. I think in the end we deserved to win that game, but the signs were still there that this England team weren't quite hitting the strides. There were some signs that maybe from game to game we were slightly improving, despite the Croatia game arguably being one of England's best performances at this World Cup, even looking back now. And then, of course, there was the Mexico game, which a lot of England fans are going to look back on with huge fond memories, and me alike, it's a great night for England. I think in hindsight, and I did think this actually before the game, I thought way too much was made about Mexico's record at the home ground when you consider who they'd played over those years. Way too much was made about the altitude. Again, these are trained athletes. I'm not saying it wouldn't impact them. And way too much was made about the crowd. You know, it was almost like we were saying that these England players had never played in front of a hostile away crowd before. And in general, it was a good performance. England came out on top when we got sent down to 10 men. You know, it was a hard-fought victory. But in hindsight, this is a poor Mexican team. And a lot of pundits were saying this was a poor Mexican team with not much teeth in attack, an aging striker. And again, even with 10 men, you feel like it would have been It'd have been a bit of a damp squid if England would have gone out at that point. And the tactics work. You know, Tuchel sat back. You don't mind putting 5 or 6 men behind the ball when you're down to 10 men and you're holding on to a lead and all that sort of stuff. Fine, great performance. We then find ourselves in a quarter-final without really, I think, in hindsight, playing a really strong side. And I mean a really strong side. And you get to Norway and you feel like this was everybody's dark horse. Very good side, arguably Norway's best ever team, and with a real threat up front. And it was a very 50-50 game. In the first half, I think England competed relatively well, lost the concentration, went 1-0 down. And in the second half, we got dominated. I don't know how England really came out of that game intact. When it went to extra time, England were the better team. Norway definitely, dropped off. But you can say England was slightly fortunate to win that game. Not massively, but slightly fortunate to win that game. So the warning signs almost across all the games, really, apart from maybe the opening game against Croatia, were all there. The defence had looked poor in previous games. It looked like the defence had found its feet against Mexico, but that was with putting 5 or 6 men behind the ball. And it seemed like from the group stage to the knockout rounds, England were just sort of getting the job done, or that'll do is probably the saying I would use for it. And it was just a case of, job done. And you always feel like it is job done, but as England, you need more. You need to feel more. You saw Jude, Bellingham and Harry Kane have fantastic tournaments, unreal tournaments, but we were massively over-reliant on them. I know people say, Argentina are reliant on Messi, France are reliant on Mbappe, and so on, but are they as reliant on those players as what we are or have been at this World Cup on Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane? Nobody else was chipping in with goals apart from Gordon in that semi-final. It was there was a real lack of talent on those wide areas that was coming through. The midfield wasn't quite clicking fully. Anderson was having good games. Rice was having good games, but never the two of them together. The Norway game seemed to be the point where a lot of fans were saying this may be it. Not because it was Norway, but the quarter-final in particular, when you're planning your route, it looked like it was going to be Brazil. Norway beat Brazil, so arguably they're a very good team, and it just felt like for a lot of fans this may have been our peak for this England side. So in some ways, you look at England getting to a semi-final and feel like we've met expectations for most people, not all, but we did what most of us thought would be the bare minimum for this side. Thomas Tuchel, though, was brought in to beat the big teams, to do what Gareth Southgate couldn't do against Italy, Spain, Croatia in those important semi-final and final games. This is what he was brought in to do. We get to a semi-final against Argentina, and what does he do? He actually plays an absolute tactical masterclass for the first 60 minutes. He got it absolutely spot on. He picked the right starting 11. I thought England were the better team until we scored. In that 60 minutes of the game, I think England were comfortably the better team. I didn't think we looked under any threat. Messi was kept quiet. It was going all England's way. I've never known a game, though, where a manager has thrown the game as much as that. He literally takes Anthony Gordon off and Declan Rice and brings on 5 or 6 defenders. And the plan, for whatever reason, was then just to sit back for 30 minutes and invite the pressure on. There was no out ball. And you got to look at the way we capitulated at the end of that game. It was, yes, Argentina took their opportunity to get back into the game, but England just completely gave up. They literally resigned themselves to putting 10 men behind the ball immediately after scoring. And we've seen that time and time again, particularly over the past 10 to 15 years. The biggest negatives from this World Cup is you feel like we haven't learnt our lessons from previous years. Thomas Tuchel hasn't achieved what he's been brought in for and paid a substantial amount of money to do so, by the way. And I am now in a position where I feel like Tuchel should go. I feel like it was an experiment to bring in a big-name coach. It hasn't worked. I'd rather go back to sort of bringing our own coaches through, the under-21s, give Lee Carsley the post. That's where I would go. The FA aren't going to do that, though. Thomas Tuchel will be in charge for Euro 2028 unless Thomas Tuchel decides to leave. I think Jed Spence comes out of this tournament highly rated. Anthony Gordon's stock has risen slightly as well. If people doubted him previously, he did start to step up. Jude Bellingham has gone from superstar to megastar at this World Cup. Outside of that, really, can you really pick out any other outstanding players at this tournament? I mean, even Jed Spence had his moments. So when you look at it overall, not enough of the lads stepped up. I mean, Anderson and Rice, I definitely put them in that bracket. The centre-backs looked weak whenever any sort of threat was against them. Pickford was very hit and miss, but I can't knock Pickford. I think he's England's greatest ever keeper. But yeah, when you really reflect on England's tournament, not enough players stood up. It was all on Bellingham and Harry Kane. Positives, though, the absolute positives is it is another semi-final, as much as that doesn't feel like a positive when we yet again fail at that hurdle. But still reaching semi-finals is absolutely a positive. Bellingham is still a star for the future. Other players did gain priceless experience when you look at some of those fullback positions and you feel like finally moving forward, they can start to embed themselves as regular international players. And you would hope from this that Tuchel has learnt his lesson. And that's all I can say about the disaster in that last 20-30 minutes. And I'm going to take that forward as a positive moving into the Euros. So here's where I'm torn. A part of me really feels like a semi-final isn't good enough. And not another one, not another hurdle broken. And in reality, that has to be true for this England team. It is, again, another failure when really the expectation for England going into every tournament is to win it. So we haven't won anything. Still, it still hasn't come home. So does it feel like, though, England have gone backwards? I don't think it is England going backwards, but I also don't think it's England going forwards. I think as we are, and as we have been, under that latter years of Gareth Southgate, England are difficult to beat. We grind results out against teams where you expect us to beat them, but ultimately when you come up against a team that can match us or slightly better, and we just fold. We never win those really solid 50-50 games, and it's still a massive headache for England. And again, I think it's a manager decision that has hugely cost us. And history doesn't remember semi-finals, really. I mean, it does for England fans because we don't get to that many, but history remembers winners. And England, yet again, are leaving a World Cup with still 1 star on their shirt. And that, at the minute, is very, very difficult to take. Really, really difficult. The worry moving forward as well is who is picking up that mantle from Harry Kane. And ultimately, we're not replacing him. We are not going to get a player anywhere near the quality of Harry Kane. He is once in a lifetime. But what we then need is a striker who can almost compete with him, particularly within his later years. And we've got to get some wide players who are much more threatening, creative, goal scoring. The midfield still isn't right. I'm not convinced that we keep the ball anywhere near as well as other teams. And I think English football still doesn't play those fine margins well, and that's what's proven ultimately again in the World Cup. It still feels like the same issues that has faced England for the past 60 years are still there. If you're new to this channel and you've enjoyed this content and you've followed me throughout this World Cup, over 90% of you haven't joined. The algorithm will probably already bomb on this now England are out, so please just hit that subscribe button, guys. It massively helps me out. I will be continuing my journey to the Euros in 2028 and then the World Cup in 4 years' time, where England do go again. I just want to thank every single one of you who has supported this channel throughout the entire tournament. What a journey I've been on personally, and us as a channel we have been on. It's been a fantastic journey. When you go back to those qualifying games now, what feels like a couple of years ago, whenever it was, what a journey. We do it again. Thank you for everybody who's watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you all on my next video.